Welcome to Harmonized. I am your host, Gigi Naval, integrative and functional registered dietitian nutritionist, here to help you harmonize your gut and hormone health for improved metabolic health. Yes, we have a misunderstood mineral, poor copper. A lot of people don't pay attention to it or don't even care. And why should we? Well, stick around because that's exactly what we are going to talk about. Copper. And believe it or not, copper is also needed for us to have really adequate energy. We know how important it is to have energy to get through the day, to get from point A to point B to point F to point R, then to point Z, right? There are all these different points throughout the day that we need to get through, but we really need adequate energy that helps us also feel good. And yeah, could you imagine? Copper is so important in having really good energy. But not only that, copper is needed for us in order to have a really good functioning immune system. Copper is antifungal, antibacterial, and antiviral. Oh, yes, indeed. And I can go on and on and on, and there will be one more role that it is a part of, but I will talk a little bit about that later on. Okay, so here's a very important aspect that I keep talking about, and I really need for you to embrace this because many of us don't realize that we are in a copper imbalance, or really what we call copper toxicity. And it's not that easy to understand or figure it out, but I will do my best to help walk you through it. And so people might think, oh, copper toxicity, then I'll just cut back on the foods that are rich or high in copper. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so here's the thing. I didn't realize that I was in copper toxicity until years later. I believe one of the main contributors to me being in copper toxicity was me consuming a vegetarian diet from when I was 15 years old to 30 years old. Okay, let me explain how this can happen to others who consume a vegetarian or a vegan diet. That's not the only reason why people go into copper toxicity. Other reasons could be mother was in copper toxicity and mom didn't know she had to rebalance it out before having a child. And that was passed on to her baby. So that's another reason why some people are in copper toxicity, because the pipes in their house are copper pipes. And so when you bathe in the water that comes through your house, through the copper pipes, that can contribute to our copper load. Also, if you're cooking with copper cookware, that can also contribute to copper toxicity. These are just a few reasons. Oh, and this is a really important one. Being on birth control pills, being on any IUD, especially copper IUDs. Yes, all of those can affect our copper balance, which can lead us to having a copper imbalance, which really it should be called copper toxicity. So let's go through this. Let's just slow down for a minute and realize that copper needs to be bound to a protein called ceruloplasmin. And when it's bound to ceruloplasmin, then this vehicle, ceruloplasmin, will just take it to the right places where it needs to be, and it helps it function in the way it needs to be. And so if we have a lot of unbound copper floating through our system, well, then that's what contributes to copper toxicity. We will never really truly be in true copper deficiency. But when we say we are in copper toxicity, we are talking about the unbound copper. When we have too much of that, that can wreak havoc on our energy levels and in our hormone levels and chronic medical conditions. So copper needs to be bound to ceruloplasmin. It is bound to ceruloplasmin with the help of vitamin A. Vitamin A has to be in its active form called retinol. Just in the beta-carotene form, the inactive form, that's not going to help bind copper to ceruloplasmin. We need the active form of vitamin A, which is retinol. But that's not all we need. The body needs to have adequate amounts of bioavailable zinc in the body, because when the body has adequate amounts of bioavailable zinc, then yes, the liver will produce enough ceruloplasmin to bind with the copper, just as long as there is retinol, vitamin A. However, when one consumes less bioavailable zinc and eventually becomes deficient in bioavailable zinc by way of what one eats, like a vegetarian diet is deficient in bioavailable zinc, so that can contribute to that. When one is on birth control pills and other birth control implants, that can affect the level of zinc in the body. And when the body senses there's not enough bioavailable zinc, then the liver will hold off on producing protein, the ceruloplasmin. And so if there's not enough ceruloplasmin, then there won't be enough to bind with copper. And then if there's not enough vitamin A in the retinol form, then copper cannot be bound adequately. But when one consumes adequate amounts of high bioavailable zinc, then the liver will say, okay, we are in business. Here we go with the ceruloplasmin. There's vitamin A. Now we can bind to copper. And this needs to happen on a regular basis because copper works with iron, and iron needs to be in this recycling pattern with copper, ceruloplasmin, and retinol. If those elements are not there, then iron can accumulate in the cells and in the lining of the GI tract. And then that elevated amount of iron that's not being recycled will build up, so to speak, and that can serve as food for bacterial overgrowth. And we need to keep in mind that when it comes to unbound copper, that works with estrogen. Zinc works with progesterone and testosterone. So if those are out of balance, then we can be in estrogen dominance because there's a lot of unbound copper and not enough zinc with the progesterone and testosterone. But one can definitely rebalance. There is no dead end situation for people when it comes to this. It can be rebalanced. But copper is also needed for neurotransmitters as well, neurotransmitter production. So when copper is in toxicity levels, it can affect our mental health. It can exacerbate feelings of anxiety, depression. So not only does it affect our mental health, it can also affect other chronic medical conditions. Okay, and this is what I really believe, because our habits can really lead to having unbalanced, unbound copper. And we have done this to ourselves for years, that by the time we hit perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, and for men, andropause, for some, it can be worse than others, especially when these minerals are out of balance. But if this is addressed, then going through those life stages can be so much smoother. All right. If you have any questions about Unbound Copper, don't hesitate to ask. You can either ask in the comments down below or send me a DM on Instagram. All right, friend, keep in mind, Jesus is coming soon. Let us do all that we can to get ready to meet him. And in all that we do, in all that we drink, let us do it all for the glory of God.